My name is Joshua Gibson, and you are listening to the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast, a show dedicated to promoting a message of critical thinking as it pertains to strength training, nutrition, and well-being. This is done through interviews with experts, high-level athletes, coaches, and people heavily involved in strength sports and athletic development. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's get on to today's podcast. Hello and welcome to another podcast with your host, Joshua Gibson. I've noticed that I normally say we are live, and as many times as I've said it, that's as many times as I've lied, because this is actually pre-recorded and it goes through an editing process and then it's finally up on the podcast. So if you ever listen to this for a second time, there's just no way in the world we could ever be live twice, at least for the same episode, unless we were in some like weird time warp or something. But with that being said, I am joined today by our very special guest, Sean Rigsby. How's it going, Sean?
I'm great, Josh. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. And I feel like, so the last episode I recorded, I was a bit demeaning when I introduced our guest. So I thought this time, I'd give you the appropriate introduction, make you feel welcome. Now, for people who have been living under a rock, because when we think about weightlifting, at least in the US within the last decade, we'll say, we think of, Cal Strength, we think of Muscle Driver, we think of like the innumerous videos that have been released documenting these teams training, and you happen to be a part of Muscle Driver, which to my knowledge, since the York Barbell days, was really the only privately funded weightlifting team. And I think that's a very special experience. And, I've had Tom Schroka on and I've had your wife on the podcast, who have both been a part of Team USA when it was still together. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to kind of relive some of those experiences with you, and also to just talk more about your weightlifting career. So with that all being said, let's kind of jump to the beginning. Normally we'd go through this whole like resume thing and you talk about your biggest accomplishments, but I think we'll get to that at some point. But Sean, maybe for the listeners, you can just kind of detail why you even started lifting weights in the first place.
Sure. I'll do that. But since you did that, before I forget, I just want to say this real quick. It is an incredible how quickly the sport has expanded and grown. Mm-hmm. And in the short time that it's done, because people do not know what Muscle Driver was quite often when I speak to them and they come to my gym. But there was one moment that was like very validating. I can't tell you how many people I coach that come in that are like really about weightlifting, and they've got like their hook grip gear on and, maybe their weightlifting house tape. But, it's like, oh, well, I used to lift on this team. And they're like, what is that? I've never heard of that. I was like, oh, don't worry about it. That's okay. But one moment of validation was I was lucky enough to compete in the World Championships last year on behalf of Ireland. And I'm in the elevator, and this is the night before Kate and I becomes a world champion. Mm-hmm. And she looks at me and she goes, "You look familiar. Are you Sean Rigsby?" And like, I was standing with my wife. It's like, and that makes you're Taylor Harris. And we're like, yeah. Like, I'd actually never met Kate before. It's like, I used to watch your videos all the time. And it was like, oh, wow. Thanks, Kate and I. Go, good luck. Go be a world champion. So it was like nice after a couple of years of no one really knowing what that was, which is unfortunate. Not because I need people to know who I am, but of how unique and special it was, as you outlined. But anyway, I got into weightlifting as a way to supplement my training. I used to play rugby. I used to play rugby in the Bay Area for a couple clubs. But I realized there was a difference between pro rugby in the United States is not, at the level of anywhere else in the world. But what I did notice about professionals is that they trained. They didn't just play rugby. They did strength conditioning. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I should probably get into that. And a good friend of mine suggested doing CrossFit. And it was, this would be like 2008 or 2009. So CrossFit still pretty much in its infancy at that time. And I was lucky enough to get rooted into a subsect of, CrossFit culture that did focus heavily on strength training. It wasn't just, you come in, you do a Metcon, let's do a hero WOD today. And tomorrow let's, do 30 clean and jerks or whatever. It was definitely structured in a way that like, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to do, linear periodization, strength training, and then we're also going to do our conditioning. And it just, we're just calling it CrossFit because that's a cool thing to call it right now. But I did it to get better at that. And the more that I trained and as the years progressed, it became clear that, maybe I'm not going to be a professional rugby player, and that's okay. But I enjoy training so much, and I want to learn as much as I can about it. And that transformed into a place where I wanted to educate others and coach others. So I wanted to be a strength conditioning coach. And if you're going to do that, I think you don't need to be like a highly competitive athlete or really good at weightlifting, but you should at least be competent. And so I started seeking out education on how to do that, to become a better coach, to advance, in that career eventually. And well, that would be about 2010. And there was this really popular, YouTube channel called California Strength with this guy in like strappy sandals who's telling you how to lift from these 3 positions with these 3 other dudes in the background. And I was like, well, that guy seemed like he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to sign up with a USAW, coaching certification and go talk to him. And that was kind of how it all began there. I have been a coach longer than I've been an athlete in weightlifting, because that's really the way that the journey began. It just so happened that, it went along this different route. But so that was, 2010, meeting Glenn Penlay, and you're really never looking back, discovering that how addicting weightlifting can be and how fulfilling it is training wise, and just going from there.
Yeah. And you've obviously competed, like you said, on a world stage, and you've medaled at USA weightlifting national meets, and you're multiple time Irish national champion. So you're obviously not bad.
I was okay. It's hard for me to talk about those things because I was in an environment. We had one Olympian. We basically produced an Olympian. She wasn't an Olympian at the time, and then you have people like Travis Cooper and James Tatum, obviously, who are just phenomenal lifters and multiple time international medalists. So I try not to get into my athletic achievements, but no, I wasn't bad. I was an American Open finals medalist, University Nationals medalist. I've medaled with a couple of the other whatever they call them now, the AO series things or whatever. I don't think those are national meets, but and then I've been fortunate enough being a dual citizen. I lift for the Republic of Ireland now, and I been national champion over there and national record holder in 2 categories, and they've been kind enough to allow me to go compete European championships, world championships, stuff like that. So no, I put some time in for sure.
Now, when you made that transition and started to get into weightlifting a little more seriously, so you watched those California Strength videos, you saw Glenn, coaching, and you thought, okay, this is probably for me. And then you become a USA weightlifting coach. There is a gap between that moment and then when you were brought on to MDUSA to train full time. So what kind of happened between that span of a few years that led to you eventually training full time to realize whatever athletic potential that you obviously thought you had at the moment and thought you would try to take advantage of?
Sure. Yeah. I was, let's see. So after meeting Glenn, at the time, I think I was coaching at a CrossFit, and I was just training. I just caught the fever. I remember they're just like, you just got to snatch and clean every day, and you got to go as heavy as possible, right, to make rapid progress. And I actually tore my meniscus like within a few months of that, and I was like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't like max literally every day, So at least I learned that lesson pretty early on. But I was coaching CrossFit for a bit, and then I was actually coaching at a sports performance facility. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Velocity, but they're like a bigger national brand for doing like NFL combine training and stuff like that. And that's what I was doing. I was an assistant sports performance director at one of the ones out in California, and I was coaching all kinds of athletes, from people as young as 7 to, NCAA athletes to like NFL and MLB pros, and then just regular folks. But the whole time I'm just training with, I don't know, a ferocity and a madness that I don't have in me anymore. I think it was a great outlet for my frustrations, either in my life or with how I have to deal with human beings sometimes. um, but yeah, I did that. I started training. I used to make trips. I would take a week-long vacation here and there, usually about twice a year, and I would drive up to Cal Strength again, because Glenn, this is a testament to Glenn, and like how welcoming, and everybody, I think everybody that knew Glenn or has even heard about him has heard about how open he was to like helping people. I think that's really his legacy, if anything, is just how you. I met the guy 2 days, and all of a sudden he's telling me, he's like, "Yeah, just come on up anytime, and we'll do some training and get some doubles." And anyway, this is when we were in California, but I would come up, and I would just try to see. I recommend everybody go see weightlifting in person, like by real weightlifters, as early as you can, so you can understand the urgency and the speed that's required to do it. It doesn't mean that you have to like go as fast as possible when you're first learning and rip the bar off the floor, but to understand, it's like, oh, this is how it's done. The video doesn't really give you the same kind of feeling. It's much more violent in person. At least it is when you're first introduced to it. You get used to it. But yeah, I did that. I would train and get as much knowledge from all those guys. I remember Kevin Cornell tried to get me to buy him like a steak dinner for the secrets to weightlifting training or something like that. And I actually was there the first day Tom Schroka met Glenn Penley. We were at training, and I remember Glenn goes, "Oh, well, I got to go to the airport. I got to pick up this guy, some new super." And then in walks Tom Schroka, guy who would be one of my best friends, the first day. And I was like, "Fuck, this guy's strong." But yeah, so that took about, I'd say, 2-ish years of like training weightlifting full time, and just having a goal of, like everybody else, getting to the national championships or something like that, and doing the best I could. And in that time, Muscle Driver happened. So I remember the first Muscle Driver tryout occurred, and I really wanted to go, and I didn't, because at the time I had just begun a new relationship with someone in California. I was like, oh, well, I should probably see this through and give that a shot. And, it was the last time I put relationships before weightlifting, let me tell you. But but I remember the second tryout came around, and I don't know if it was a year. I think it was only like a couple months, maybe like 6 to 8 months. But I woke up every day with regret. I mean it. People say that sometimes. The first thing every day that I thought of was like, I should have at least tried out, just so I could know, whether the answer was no or not. And well, I booked a ticket, did the next one, and turned out the answer was yes. So I wasn't a great lifter or anything like that. I think the reason there were two reasons I think I got hired, so to speak. One was I have a very good jerk, and the figuring was like, well, if you can jerk well, we can teach you the other stuff, but it's hard to teach someone to jerk well. It's kind of like the last thing people figure out, and I had already figured that part out. And the other one was that I was crazy enough to like fly from California and come over here and put everything on hold. I think they just liked that there was madness in me. But yeah, I flew back home, got a call from Glenn. I was not offered any money or anything. Just come on out. You can train. You might have a chance to earn a stipend. And I packed my car. I said, give me 2 months. I saved up as much money as I could. I packed my car with everything I could find, and I moved to South Carolina. So
yeah. So I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I think to contextualize this a bit more before, obviously I have some stuff, some questions about Cal Strength, because seeing you from Muscle Driver and then kind of keeping up to, speed with you now with your training and coaching, I had never realized that you had gone to Cal Strength as frequently as you did, and kind of been introduced to Glenn and that whole world beforehand. So I think that's interesting in and of itself. But what were your best lifts, just for context? Like when you started, and then when you tried out, you obviously probably remember your tryout numbers, but where were you at kind of in your development?
It's hard for me to remember anything pre-muscle driver, I guess, like numbers wise. But I do remember my tryouts. I went 6 for 6. I did 132 and 168. And I weighed about like 115 kilos or something like that.
Yeah.
So
was that
go ahead.
Was that so I remember during a lot of those videos, people would often say that you've jerked 210.
215.
Now, when did that happen? 215. When did that happen?
That must have been 2015. So I tried out and I moved out there in 2013. Okay. The thing was, I wasn't really allowed to push that very much too often. So like I've held 220 over my head.
Wow.
With several times with like a knee buried into the floor. Like I was just like, oh damn.
Yeah.
But I've doubled 210, done
wow.
a bunch of doubles with 200. Like jerks always came very naturally to me. They're just with that, like it was always about like, do I get the opportunities to express that? And even then, like I think when I cleaned the 168 my tryout, what they remarked is that like the bar, when I stand up, the bar literally flies above my head as if to do like a half thruster, so to speak, and then I do the jerk. That part is, I'm kind of built for it. I got these short pistony legs and a thick torso, but much better at jerks than the other lifts, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's incredible. Did you ever have a goal in mind? I mean, obviously 215, like it's a massive amount of weight, but did you ever think like 220, 227, kind of when you were around your peak at that point?
I always believed I was going to clean and jerk 500 pounds because I knew I could jerk it. And if I could just keep training and get strong enough, I thought I could clean it too. Maybe that's naive, but yeah, I always thought I never, I'm not very good at snatching. And I'm cursed. Like I'm kind of the ideal body type for a weightlifter as far as anthropometry goes. I've got these short legs, longer torso. My arms could probably be a little longer, but like what I got cursed with are these bitch fingers that that are just, especially a bitch thumb. Like my hands are very thick, but they're sausagey and short, so they're not helpful for holding a hook grip. I can barely hold a hook. So my big issue the entire time I've been strength training has been pulling. I suck it. I suck at like I was able to squat like 500 for 5, like very quickly.
Wow.
I think within 3 months of squatting, I squatted 500 pounds or something like that.
Jesus.
But like, so like, that's just my mechanics, helping me out. But deadlifting 500 for 5 was like, oh, I've got to try really hard. I guess with a mixed grip, it wasn't that bad, but yeah, with a hook grip, it's pretty tough. So, but yeah, I never thought, oh, I'm going to be one of the guys who did 400 in the snatch, but I was like, I'm going to clean and jerk 500 pounds. And unfortunately never got there, but I'm not done yet.
Yeah. I mean, seriously though, look at Travis Cooper, who just snatched 152. It's incredible. Like it's really, really impressive. People can maintain that peak performance for so long and still, or still improve,
Travis is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Even spoke to like Melanie Roach recently, who had that long layoff and then came back and made the Olympic team. And just people going like decades, just really around their top end and even improving at some point. So who knows? But we'll kind of talk about like the whole muscle driver situation and the kind of rate at which you progress there, and then looking back what you might change. But the first few times you met Glenn up until you tried out at muscle driver, as you were learning more about the sport of weightlifting, what were kind of the bedrock ideas or concepts or the bits of information that you got from Glenn that were able to supplement how you coached? And has much of that changed since? Obviously that's a loaded question. A lot of it has changed, but is there anything that stuck with you from those really early days?
Oh, it's hard. It's so much. It really is. I the Glenn I met then was much, you and Seb spent a lot of time with him in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he came back around a little bit. He was very much more lucid then.
Mm-hmm.
Much had incredible cognitive abilities and
Mm-hmm.
awareness and perception. And then, basically during the stroke, basically I kind of got the shit end of the stick because the muscle driver Glenn that I got,
Mm-hmm.
was like a on death's door kind of Glenn,
Right.
but that's not the Glenn that I met in California, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the one I was attracted to because he was so kind, but obviously, you can't mention Glenn without saying that he's an asshole, like
Mm-hmm.
in a charming way,
Mm-hmm.
not just like a pure asshole. But I do think like a lot of times the more that I learn from other coaches or try and implement new concepts, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I go back to like, well, this is what Glenn said, or like I don't always frame it that way, but it comes from there for sure. And that's because things haven't changed. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we try, like velocity based training is a big thing right now, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great. I've got one of those units, and it's has some helpful applications, or
Mm-hmm.
RPE training is probably bigger than it's ever been. All kinds of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but like how you get strong hasn't really changed. And
Mm-hmm.
that's more than anything. I think what Glenn taught me is like
Mm-hmm.
what are the principles of how you get strong. And I think the absolute best thing that he figured out more than anybody else was that like environment is everything. Environment and stress management are pretty much everything. Because if you look at the plan then, like I came home from Cal Strength, like, yeah, I'm gonna max out every day and do all this stuff, just snatch and clean jerk all the time. And that was sort of going on there, but what was going on there is they had very good stress management. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the guys, some of them weren't working or working very little, which at the time was unheard of, right? Like people getting supported to do weightlifting. Are you crazy? Like I'm not saying they weren't doing anything; they were training very hard and doing some coaching and personal training, but working as little as possible to put as much
Mm-hmm.
energy into training and recovery. And then if you put you know 5 psychopaths in a room that are ultra competitive,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have something good come out of it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really what happened. I don't think there's necessarily like, oh, here we use the Texas method or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And like that's the big secret to anything else. I think it's just that you were able to reduce stress and put people in an environment to prove that they wanted to excel. And that's those are the things that I take away that remind me like, oh, those are probably the most important things than anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
granted, when you're coaching like a regular person in weightlifting who has a 9 to 5 job, you can't really do anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
So then that's where you like tinker with
Mm-hmm.
programming and exercise selection and maybe help them optimize their lifestyle. But yeah, I think a lot of the foundational stuff that Glenn taught me back then.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned the surprise that people would have hearing that weightlifters were able to train full time without really working a job. Now it's almost the opposite, where so we spoke to Nathan Damron and he mentioned that he was working at Amazon, and we were both kind of taken aback by the fact that this guy who's been on the world stage, who's one of the best, if not the best in America in the weight class, had another job. It was almost the exception versus the norm now.
Yeah,
They're not sponsored by companies, or they're not just shilling for products to make money, or using discount codes. But Nathan is different. He seems more like one of the exceptions. Just that's just my observation. But it is really interesting how the times have changed since then.
oh for sure. Nathan is there. Like you still have your Matty Rogerses and
Mm-hmm.
your and like Matty Rogers has an agent, that
Right.
like she has an agent, dude.
Yeah.
That's some real
That's
shit.
crazy.
That's some LeBron James shit. So, that dude's like booking her for modeling or whatever the fuck it is they do.
Right.
Good for them. And or like someone like Wes Kitts, very
Hmm.
entrepreneurial. Has a lot going
Hmm.
on. So not everybody might have that skill set or even care because like I've trained with
Yeah.
Nathan a bit, and I think he just fucking wants to train,
Hmm.
and he could give a shit about anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely different times. You see, there's probably like I don't know 20 plus, maybe around 20. I haven't looked at the budget in a while. Like 20 funded weightlifters right now.
Hmm.
If you
Hmm.
just did one per weight category on both genders, so it's probably more than that. Which back then it was absolutely unheard of. You know.
Right. And kind of coming back to that second point you made about stress management and getting a lot of people in a room who are very competitive, that is an observation I've frequently made with how you coach people who do it recreationally. And when I say recreationally, it's not that they don't want to be competitive, but it's just that they probably won't make a world team. They probably don't have a shot at it. Probably don't have a shot at podiuming at nationals. Um, and that's that by definition. That has to be the majority of people. I mean, you get 1,000 people competing, 100 in a weight class, 3 can win. So there's obviously consideration with respect to the amount of people who compete versus place, but the nuance, right? The new technologies, all of that stuff, all of the details, that's where it kind of fits in, like you said, with the people who can't stress manage as well because of a 9 to 5 relationships. Like weightlifting is kind of down the ladder for them. It's maybe the 5th or 6th most important thing. It's like I need to make money. I need to like be able to feed myself, have a nice house, hang out with my family and friends, something like go for walks at night with my dog. And then it's like, and weightlift. Um, so when it comes to prioritizing that, that's never really in the back of anyone's mind. And that's not a problem. That's just kind of the way the world works.
Yeah, it's not it's
So
not exactly, important on the hierarchy of needs. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and that's yeah. Again, like I said, that's an observation I made where that's when the complexities of programming actually matter. You can't just say, well, here's an exercise, go to max, try and PR, and then the next day we'll come in and do the same thing over and over and over. Because I also think that will weed out people in the sense that I have this inkling. I can't provide any evidence to support it, but maybe there is some, that there's like a genetic component to being resistant to getting injured, and I can't say that more specifically so it actually like has any validity, but I feel like people who are really at the top are just resistant to kind of those extreme injuries or aches and pains. Maybe not like totally, but at least for the most part, to where they can handle huge
No,
workloads.
it's
And I
not. It's
mean,
100% correct. That's
yeah,
no.
like
It's not. No, I'm here. That's two people. I'm peer reviewing your science right
right.
now, and it's definitely no. If I've worked so not just in weightlifting because like in weightlifting we've
Yeah.
really only recently started getting talented athletes.
Hmm.
But I worked with a lot of professional team sport athletes, and it's just that they're fucking freaks. That's
Yeah.
all they're doing. Some of the dumbest shit sometimes in their training. That some of the like, there. I had a guy once. He came back from OTAs in the NFL, and
Hmm.
I was like, all right, let's do some squats today. And I think this is a lineman, very strong, capable person, and he didn't want to go over like 405 in the squat or whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't want to get hurt. Next day, he's in there fucking banging out 405 in the bench press for like max
Damn.
max reps, just like it's nothing,
Yeah.
and like that's fine. It doesn't matter. Some of the things I have them do are almost like, why are we doing this? Like
Hmm.
this is not just because the efficacy is low, but like this is somewhat injurious and kind of silly,
Hmm.
and I don't know that it has carryover, but you're right. I think it's two things that the people are like genetically inclined to be
Hmm.
to be yeah injury resistant or robust,
Hmm.
and that they're so gifted that their ceiling is way higher than yours and mine, so they're not
Hmm.
scratching at their ceiling all the time, if that makes sense. For me to progress, okay, to be competitive. My ceiling's fairly low, and I have to constantly punch at it
Hmm.
to try and be competitive with these exceptional athletes. But for them it's 70%.
Hmm.
Like I'm sure Wes Kitts or CJ Cummings is trying very hard, but like honestly, they're not trying as hard as I am.
Hmm.
And it's because they don't have to, and that's okay. Like that's how genetics works.
Yeah, I think that was a great adjective, robust. I think that's the best way to describe it. And you're completely right. And we actually saw this in person happening. So if anyone followed Glenn towards kind of the end of his life, when he was coaching Addison, who also trained with Mississippi Barbell, he still does, but he was coaching Addison. Addison was training 4 days a week. They were kind of, I imagine they were just going in and going heavy on like snatches, clean and jerks. When his wrist hurt, they do muscle snatches or pulls. And Addison snatch 170, clean and jerked 200 plus, training 4 days a week. Um, that's not incredibly normal, not very normal at all. So you're exactly right. I mean, people will just have to take on different workloads, or at least like assume a different priority for that workload. So Wes Kitts, he's so strong, he produces force so quickly. It's like getting him more technically sound at those heavier weights and helping him become more efficient, so he doesn't just like rocket the bar off of his hips or off of his shoulders and kind of like mistime it and put it out of position. Um Whereas like someone like myself, I need to get my squat up. I need to get I need to get stronger in general. I just need to be able to produce more force. So a lot of my training's allocated in a different place, and maybe higher volumes of training. So there's more nuance there. And once you kind of reach the top, you just see people progress with less work, um, less specific work, and it's really a sight to see. And it's pretty awesome that there's such variation. And one question I did have, just kind of circling back to you working with athletes and weightlifters, was there a difference in like kind of the satisfaction you got with either camp, that kind of drove you more to weightlifting than just to strength and conditioning specifically?
Oh, I enjoy weightlifting way more. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
that's kind of selfish. I think what I get out of coaching. I told people this. I think this year, because they kept telling me. This one person told me, "We're really thankful that you're still doing this, like through the Corona
Hmm.
thing, right? That you're
Hmm.
giving us support and this or that." I was like, "Well, first of all, you're keeping me literally employed, so like, thank you."
Yeah.
Don't, but I get it's selfish in a way because I derive purpose and satisfaction out of assisting others to their goals and uh, helping solve their problems. They're the
Hmm.
ones doing the work, but I'm permitted to assist them in the way that I can, and there's
Hmm.
so much satisfaction I get out of that, and I get that from both weightlifting and sports performance. Or I
Hmm.
even coached rugby, that's like the sport. I definitely
Hmm.
get that, but I don't know. Weightlifting is just, I guess, more fascinating, more sexy, so to speak. I don't know.
Right.
There. I think it came down more to the, I got so entrenched in weightlifting. Of course, I had a very unique opportunity, so to speak, being in the athletic and competitive circles that I was in, and got mentored by some of the absolute best coaches that America's ever produced. So, I had
Mm.
that going for me, right? I've made some friends in strength conditioning too. So like I probably have job opportunities there if I really
Mm.
wanted to. But I looked at the two paths, and weightlifting's well, it's still kind of we're coming out of the Wild West phase. We're in
Hmm.
we're in like we're settling. You know what I mean? We're
Hmm.
we're starting to build towns in the landscape of weightlifting, and
Hmm.
I'm kind of here for it. I want to see where that goes.
Mm.
Where on the strength conditioning side, stuff changes all the time, but I know what that job is. That job is, you
Mm.
go and you get a job. You work 60 to 80 hours a week. You get none of the credit for anything you do.
Mm.
And if the football coach fucks up because he calls the wrong plays, or somebody fumbles one too many times,
Mm.
you get fired. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter that I improved, sprint times, jump times,
Mm.
reduced injury, increased,
Mhm.
all strength performance. that won't
Mm,
matter very much. It will matter, obviously there's a difference between a football strength coach and an Olympic strength coach, but yeah, I didn't like the idea of at any moment I could be working a lot, and then having basically someone else controlling my job.
mhm,
Whereas in weightlifting, the nature of this landscape that's evolving, there's room for people to kind of do their own thing. Like look at all the entrepreneurs that have come out of weightlifting right now. Like
mhm,
Seb is a good example, right? Like
mhm.
who is Seb? Like who is that? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
like everybody knows now. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
would that pathway exist if weightlifting, wasn't like just growing and evolving? Like, could Seb
Mhm,
just go be, the person he is for like, football or soccer over in the
mm.
UK? Probably not. That's not a dig on him. It's just the opportunities to manage your own thing and create your own brand that exists in this sport that like don't exist in the other ones. So I guess I like the freedom of it.
Well, Sean, let me pitch you an idea. We start a new brand called Rugby House, and and we just take over the world, you and I, and we become just hyper famous, and
Well, let's edit that part
we
out so no one knows.
exactly. We're gonna see like 1,000 Instagram accounts pop up, and it's just Rugby House 1, Rugby House 2. Son of a gun.
Damn it, we
Um,
gave it away.
yeah. So kind of coming back to your time at MDUSA, where obviously you met your partner, you met your best friend or one of your best friends, you met some of the coaches who have greatly shaped you as a weightlifting coach and athlete. Maybe you can just explain what that experience was like for the listeners who maybe like myself have seen the videos and have watched you kind of grow over the years, and for people who are newer, and haven't seen what exactly transpired there.
It was the best job I ever had. So
Mm-hmm.
if I at any point sound too critical, I want that to be clear. It was definitely the best job I ever had, and it's like a life defining experience. I hear people talk about all the times like, well, back in college, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because those are like the glory days of their life,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were an athlete or not. And like, I guess those were my college years. Like I went to college also, but like, that I don't know. There's nothing quite like it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, unique concept. I guess the second and maybe since only time that there's like a
Mm-hmm.
professional weightlifting team, at least in the United States. Um, Glenn was the concept was fantastic. By the time I got there, Glenn had stopped taking care of himself to the point that he had medical problems. Glenn literally had his stroke um, like 5 minutes before my session started
Mm-hmm.
at the 2013 American Open. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was, getting warmed up. I'm like, "Where's coach? Where's coach?" And I'm walking out into the hallway, and the elevator doors open, and Glenn like falls out of the elevator.
Oh,
My singlet and my shoes are on and everything. I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, well, all right, Donnie Mac, let's go. I was concerned about him, but like, other
Mm-hmm.
people stepped in to take care of it. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
still have to go lift. And so that was a little disappointing in that I came and basically have this relationship with this person who now, isn't who they are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like a very, very different person.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, he did tremendous things for us and made those opportunities possible. Don McCauley was there, and Don ended up becoming one of the best friends I've ever had in my entire life. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, just like Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
But great technique coach and wonderful mentor. I was fortunate to get to go and teach seminars with him, around the country, actually around the world, technically, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and have some really fantastic mentors there. Some other great coaches came through there too, like Travis Mash,
Mm-hmm.
Chris Wilkes. Have good relationships with them too, and different perspectives because they all do things a little bit differently. Don is all about the technique.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn and Travis are probably more about the strength. Chris is somewhere in between that, maybe. The
Mm-hmm.
different styles of managing it, but seeing how they all melded together to create something unique was great. And then the best part is just the people. you've had a lot of these people on and spoke to them, and you remarked that they were pretty nice people, and that was the truth. Every now and then you'd get some people who are trying to maybe take advantage of the situation for their own. I'll say this about the real team that was there. We're all selfish. Don't get me wrong. Athletes got to be selfish to succeed, but no one was so selfish to detract from the thing. There was like an unspoken understanding that the team is a special, unique thing that none of us can take away from. Like, for example, if you were having a bad day lifting, I'm a very emotional lifter. So some days I didn't do this, but if you're having a bad day, you try not to let that spread around the people behind you or around you. You don't want to ruin their training, and honestly, it's a huge opportunity when you get to train around people as experienced as Travis or as insightful as James or Jared Fleming. Jared and I used to live together actually at points, and having the opportunity, someone that experienced, right, who's been around Kendrick Ferris and done all this lifting and, is a cool dude and stay up at night and talk about weightlifting is pretty neat. So it's fantastic. It had some shortcomings, but I think that was the way.
Yeah. Do you have a moment? And I know you could kind of divvy these up by like maybe competitive moment or training moment or something outside of the gym or in the gym that wasn't related to training, but anything that really sticks out as one of the highlights of your time there. Maybe it was a huge lift, maybe it was someone else hitting a huge lift, but what moments come to mind that remind you of how great that experience was?
I think it's the team camaraderie, I guess. I have this I watch this video sometimes. It's a video I took when we were at the Arnold's, I think in 2015, and it's all of us out to dinner. And the reason I watch it is because it's one of the few things that I have of Glenn, like on my phone. Like, we don't have a lot of pictures together, I realize. But I have it, and it's him, and it's Don, it's everybody. I just told a story, and it's kind of a funny story, and Glenn was laughing so hard. It was uncontrollable. He was laughing for like a full minute, uncontrollable laughter. And it made me feel so good because at that point in his life, he hadn't laughed very much, so that's why I watch it sometimes, because it's like, oh man, that was great to see him just like, that uncontrollably happy. So yeah, I think of moments like that when we used to travel together as a team, and we were still, a unit, so to speak. Obviously, everybody's got different lifting time and different weights they got to lift, but we used to watch each other lift and come support. Sometimes I would help coach some people. Sometimes like Travis would help coach some people, and that was unique about it. And it's the only time I've seen like a individual sport be so team oriented. I don't think that happens now. I know that like when USA team happens, everybody's, hey, Team USA. It's definitely not like that. That's certainly unique.
Yeah.
I've also met my wife there, so that's pretty cool. Not everybody gets a life partner out of a job or a sports team. I guess some people do, but I got that, so that's definitely a highlight for me. The lifting's great, but like the lifting's assumed to me, the points to fucking get better. So like, I don't think about those things as much.
Yeah. So you mentioned the shortcomings, or that there were shortcomings. What were some of the more negative aspects of that experience that, you can comment on, not for the sake of just, bringing up, something that wasn't enjoyable or was terrible, but just to kind of, to be real with the listeners who may have just seen the videos and assume that it's all laughter and training and PRs.
Yeah, I would literally trade everything I have to go back to doing what we were doing. I would rather do that. And it even sucks because like, I don't even know if it'd be worthwhile, because I had a shoulder surgery in December of 2015, and basically since then, snatching is very, very difficult for me. So like, I was already bad at snatching. Now I'm even worse. um, so anyway, going going back would still be fantastic, despite the fact that a lot of things could have been done better. Like one,
Mm,
Glenn could have taken better care of himself. Okay, well,
mhm,
everybody should do that, right? You should take care of your health, but like that's an individual choice. You can't
mhm,
force somebody to do that. There could have been significantly better organization. Like when I arrived, there was no process, there was no like contract, there was no
mm,
uh, team. So if you joined, if Josh is going to join the Ohio State Buckeyes, right, as a
mhm,
member of the football team, you'll be submitted to like lots of paperwork on like what the expectations of you
mm,
are as an
mhm,
athlete, right? This is standard for like any NCAA program, even probably NAIA, and all the way down to D3. So
mhm,
none of that existed really, and granted, it's because they probably didn't really think about it because they're doing this new thing. But it wouldn't be super hard to talk to somebody who's been there. They knew the people, be like, hey, how do you
mhm,
bring athletes on? What's your onboarding process? What's your expectations? What's your code of conduct? None of that really existed. Eventually that sort of evolved and shook out, but like, even then it was lackluster when they finally had some sort of system in place. So it would have been really
mhm,
helpful to know like exactly what's expected of you. You kind of took your cues from coach and you took your cues from your teammates, but
mhm,
but no one really knew, because it wasn't on paper. And even then,
mhm,
like back then, stipends were kind of weird, So when I joined, I came out even though they told me like you're not guaranteed a stipend. I had to lift in like once a month in like a Thunderdome style
mhm.
lift for lift, last man standing, highest Sinclair face off with four other dudes
Mm,
to get a stipend, and like that happened for 3 months straight. Like the idea was like, oh, we'll only have these many stipends, but we have this many people, so you four guys at the bottom of the
mm,
totem pole, whoever comes out with the highest Sinclair, is gonna go home with a stipend for the next month. And
mhm,
I'd basically put myself in a I cannot go home situation. I like that's what I told myself. Like you will not go home, but you
mhm.
also cannot stay here if you don't get this $400. So like you will do whatever is possible. And it wasn't like a meet. I think we had like 5 lifts in each. And when Glenn said it was on Sinclair, I was like, motherfucker, I'm the fat guy, like, of course. But I won it. I won it every month. And then
Wow.
after the third month, Glenn said, well, Sean's a fucking psychopath, so we're just gonna not do this anymore. And it was that. And then I think like 3 months after that, we just decided we had like 20 stipends now, so it was fine. So I
Mm,
was like, you got to be kidding me.
yeah.
But yeah. So having more clarity on uh, how stipends worked would have been cool. Because when I came out, Glenn told me how it was, but like that wasn't in paper or anything. Um,
Mm,
and
mhm,
then even Glenn told me a number that I could do to increase my stipend, right, to go into the B team. Well, I did that number, but like when I did it, this was like post stroke, and
mhm.
Glenn's kind of a back seat, and I go upstairs to management, and they're like, "Oh no, no, that's not gonna be enough." And I was like, "Well, all right, cool." I
Mhm.
did the thing that was asked of me, and there's no follow up on that. And like I know it was only like 300 extra bucks a month, but $300 would have changed my fucking life at
Mhm.
that time, because that's like all my bills. Like if you live in
Mhm.
South Carolina, man, like you can get all your bills done for $700. You really can.
Wow.
Like if you got a roommate and you can get a cheap apartment, like you can get it done. You might be a little over on groceries, but as long as you're careful, you can make it happen. So like I would have
Mhm.
had to work very very little, like if that had
Mhm.
happened. Whereas like $300, would that affect anybody's bottom line? I don't know. So those things were unclear. And then my biggest complaint would actually be the all coaches, not just any one coach. And maybe this is management's fault for not requiring this of them. You have a situation where at one point, we had 3 coaches. We
Mhm.
had Glenn, Don, and Travis, and then later it would be Glenn, Don, and Chris Wilkes. So you
Mhm.
have 3 coaches who are on salary, which, by the way, has never been fucking heard of in the history of ever. You think
Mhm.
athletes getting paid to train is new? Coaches getting paid is a fucking very new thing. Okay. So like that's such a novel concept. You just coached because you enjoyed it, right? Which I do, but getting paid to do this thing is very young. So at the time you had 3 dudes on salary, and I knew how much they were making. It was pretty good money. It's probably more than it should have been, honestly. And they're effectively working, if we did 9 sessions a week, say be generous, and that each session took 3 hours, that'd be 27 hours a week. So you have a 27-hour a week job, so just over part-time, definitely nowhere near full-time, and you're getting paid a good amount of money to do it. What the fuck are you doing in between hours? They were definitely getting paid more than like a full-time salary, if you see what I'm getting at. I think there should have been much more involvement with the athletes, like setting up individual. Sometimes we did this. We usually only did it after a meet or before a meet, like athlete meetings, to determine, what the goals are or how that went and what we could do better. But there was no individualization of programming. There was no like regular checking in, and obviously we saw each other every day, so there probably wasn't an idea of how to formalize that process. But I think it would have been super helpful to like actually sit down, put numbers down, track, like we've talked about, if you're not tracking things, you're just not doing the best you could do. I'm not saying that, tracking number of lifts or getting your average intensity or total training tonnage or any of these things is the secret, because it's not. The secret to success was the system. But we could definitely have at least identified trends that I think would have been helpful for everybody. Because, you come into Muscle Driver, I was just this guy who had been like lifting in his garage or like in a CrossFit gym for 2 years. And all of a sudden I'm told, yeah, you got to train 9 sessions a week because that's the job, right? Was I ready for 9 sessions a week? No. And a lot of people weren't. We had a lot of athletes come in who, were like normal folks who had jobs and, gave everything they had up to, try this dream out. And I think 9 sessions immediately was more detrimental to their development. There was no long-term development picture. It was just, hey, you're coming in, you're doing 9 sessions. Our system's the best, obviously, because we've got the best lifters. So shut up, pussy, and do it. And, that was it. When I think if a slightly more nuanced approach had been taken, just been like, Sean's kind of fat and, only trained 5 times before this. Maybe let's start like 7. Let's start. You know what I mean? Just like, let's start there and then we'll work his way up, or take a look at some of our Don used to call us novice elites. Because at the time we were doing basically, elite's a funny term, but at the time we're all nationally competitive, right? At that time. Nowadays, who knows? But, and got there very quickly, right? But that didn't mean you had 10 plus years of GPP development, right? A lot of us probably came from a sport, but many of us did not train in the amount of time that you would see in like in Eastern Bloc system or even a Chinese system. So you have all these people doing relatively advanced. If you want to use like a classification, you're essentially, candidate for Master of Sport type numbers, but none of the training history that a candidate for Master of Sport would have. And that becomes problematic when you don't have that base to build off of, and you're just like, hey, this is a job, and we expect you to go and win these team titles and win fucking medals. And I don't really give a shit whether, how it happens, just get it done. So that's kind of the summary of my gripes there, is that I just think it could be done better. Was it all still great? Yes. But we had opportunities and the time and the resources to do it even better.
Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting to hear it coming from that perspective. Because I've obviously just listened to people talk about it, but listened to Glenn and Rachel Davis and Travis Cooper and James Tatum, I think on a podcast episode, talk about Muscle Driver. One question I had thinking about the number of coaches, it sounded like there was this kind of like branching or splitting of the athletes, where they would, each kind of fall under one of the 3 coaches. And that would create like this kind of difference between the groupings, where some people would, go more to this one and some to others. Was that ever like an issue in your opinion, where like if some people thought, okay, Glenn is my coach, I'll listen to Glenn, Some people thought Don is my coach, I'll listen to Don. Some people thought Chris is my coach, I'll listen to Chris, instead of being kind of one unit? Or do you think that was kind of necessary given the number of people and the number of coaches?
It's a little column A, a little column B for sure. I think
Mm-hmm.
full competition team. I think at one point we had like 15 people training in the same room at the same time. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe even slightly more. That's a lot of people for like one person to manage. If you're trying to do like in Russia, there's one coach, one athlete. Like that's
Right.
like that's it. So 15 versus one. I coach here at my gym. Sometimes, yeah, it's just me and like 15, 20 people, and
Yeah.
that stretches me to the very limits of my abilities for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Zygmunt
Mm-hmm.
had a fantastic system where like he was fucking he put all those kids at the OTC in like a circle, and he had the iPad on the tablet,
Mm.
and he would basically like circle around almost. Like I don't think he set it up that way. It just kind of happened naturally.
Mm.
But yeah, so people gravitate towards someone they have a good connection with. That just happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of us as coaches are doing the same shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing the same important shit, right? Like by and large. So the way that I say it is different than the way than you say it, or the way that Dave Spitz says it, or Travis Match says it,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people are going to gravitate towards who they feel is communicating effectively with them. And there's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing wrong with that. There definitely was some tension. I think it was more tension, honestly, between Glenn and Don than it was between
Mm.
any of us. Like if there was ever any tension, it was just that, like, man, this is weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and they're like, we have to feel weird now because they're being weird.
Mm-hmm.
So like there was an element of that towards the end, and I was definitely one of the Don guys. Like I'll come out and say it, because
Mm-hmm.
I had a very, very good connection. Like until I met Don McCauley, basically in like late 2013, I didn't know how to weightlift. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to snatch or clean. I didn't know how to do shit. And he had an incredibly helpful influence on my technical strides as a lifter.
Mm-hmm.
So, if all of a sudden I've figured it out, and this is the guy who's taught me how to do it, I'm going to have a connection with that person. Now that being said, like I'm better at programming than Don is. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I am. So it's a little bit hard to be like, have your coach write you a program when like I know I'm better at it. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's arrogant, but like I think Don would even admit that. He had his strengths and weaknesses. He wasn't bad at programming by any means. I think he was just less interested in it, if that makes any sense. Whereas
Yeah,
Glenn was like
was the
super
program
interested in it. Go ahead.
was the program being like fed down from the top, from the kind of the group as one, or was it each coach would kind of like write up a session for the day? And I know this probably changed as Glenn recovered from his stroke, and responsibility maybe shifted around, but I like my understanding is that it was just like one program, the team would follow the program, and maybe changes would be made. But was it a little bit more complicated than that?
Nope.
Yeah.
um, like before I got there, it does seem like Glenn would take the time to individualize a little bit. Like you'd probably
Mm-hmm.
be doing generally the same amount of lifts. Like if you're a
Mm-hmm.
super, you might do like 3 sets of 5 instead of 5 sets of 5 one day, just as an example, because supers
Mm-hmm.
are pieces of shit and can't recover. But but whereas like Morgan King could crush volume and be no problem. There there
Yeah.
are there are like physiological differences. So like Glenn would put a little bit of that in there. But like for example, the most of the individualization, when I first got there, I could see that this is how it used to work. Is that like, okay, Sean needs to work more on this, so I'm going to give him this variation, but the volume is essentially identical to what
Mm-hmm.
like Tom or Caleb or whoever would be doing, right? And I don't think that's necessarily a bad system.
Mm-hmm.
It's because like the sauce was in the competition with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's still like if I'm doing low hang snatch and you're doing high block snatch, I'm still gonna fucking try and outlift you. Like
Right.
that's just how it's gonna go. And then like days where we're all doing competitive lifts from the floor, that opportunity is still there too. Um, so that's how it seemed to work. When Don came on, it was still Glenn holding the reins, but some collaboration. And I think
Mm-hmm.
if I think if they had done a little more, if they had done a little more of that system, that probably would have been the best, like that they could have
Mm-hmm.
done. But then Glenn had a stroke, so there was that. Don sort of took the reins, and it became, you, I mean, we only knew how to train one way, so I'm not gonna say we didn't still do, if today was supposed to be like only like 5 or 6 singles at like 85% or something,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 95%, 100% still got on there quite often, under Don's program. But it was definitely more like classic Russian,
Mm-hmm.
more volume and lower intensities
Mm-hmm.
kind of influences what was going on. And I didn't think that was a bad program either, because we actually all did that as a team too for a period of time, and had some success. Actually, Ariel Stevens, I don't know if you know who that is. She's Ariel Ford now. Had
Yeah, I actually did a podcast with her as well. She's awesome.
Yeah, she had some of the like meteoric success doing that
Mm-hmm.
program.
Mm-hmm.
Like incredible. So like it didn't mean the program was bad or anything like that, like especially in the way that we were applying it. And then that evolved into, I guess, as long as Glenn was like not fit for duty,
Mm-hmm.
that Don sort of had the reins. I think Travis had some input. I remember, I guess, in the last, like the year we, as a team, were at our peak when like the Wilks were there. Chris and Don kind of collaborated on a program, and it
Mm-hmm.
seemed that Glenn was getting to a point where he felt recovered enough to be involved again, but no one, Don and Chris weren't sure about that. It seemed
Mm-hmm.
like, and not like not wanting to have him involved, but like not sure that he's really recovered. But then you,
Right.
you have athletes like Travis and James who have a good relationship with Glenn, and of course they want him to be
Mm-hmm.
their coach. So yeah, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
branched off. I'd say 2015 onward into like slightly different programs. Oh, and if someone was prepping for like a meet, like a worlds, like then they'd get a
Mm-hmm.
different, they'd be on a peaking program, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, the athlete would have some input on how to do that. But yeah, there was definitely a weird tension towards the end. I remember we had like a meeting about it, trying to figure it out. And
Mm-hmm.
I lean on the Don side of things, because like Glenn literally couldn't fucking see for a period of time
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
I understand during the time that you and Seb had with him that he seems to have gotten better, and that's genuinely great, because that's more of the Glenn that I met in 2010 as opposed to the one that I got during my time as a professional athlete. So
Yeah. Yeah. As far as how the differences in like programming and training kind of coalesced at Muscle Driver, did that help influence the way you coach currently? Because I'm assuming you get exposure to a Glenn style, which is very heavy, not much more than singles and doubles, a very traditional strength program. And it's all kind of like a conjugate program in that you're trying to get stronger, you're trying to get better at the lifts, you're trying to always push that top end up. And then with Don, you get not the opposite, but you get again something different, right? Which gives you exposure to different styles, different training preferences that you can kind of pull from and pick from later on. So did that have a lot of influence on how you kind of operate now as a coach who oversees, massive numbers of athletes?
absolutely. Also, I love that you called what Glenn style sort of conjugate. Did he ever say, like, because I know he got more friendly with Louis towards the end there. Did he ever say that like that's essentially what he's doing?
Well, he wrote a book which is actually pretty darn good called West Side for Weightlifting, and you can see a lot of the influence in there. Later on, it became like more strength forward, and that he'd like do a lot of deadlifts and squats. And I think if he would have actually used more of Louis' system for the deadlift, it would have been more effective, because we were just doing heavy fives multiple times a week
Mm.
after heavy fives in the squat paired with the snatch, clean and jerk. I think if he would have had like a more speed oriented day and then more of a day with like lower volumes, higher attempts, that would have made a little more sense. But yeah, that's essentially what it was kind of morphing into, is, and that's kind of what his system looked like. You have higher volume days initially, and then towards the end of the week, you have max effort days. with the strength work, it was a little less. It was more just kind of like the Texas method through and through until, it was always fives.
Yeah, well,
That's really
he
what
was
the strength
he
work
was
was.
falling back in what he knew,
Mhm.
and what, to be fair, worked a lot of the
Yeah.
time. But that's so Tom and I both had the same conversation with Glenn at some point, and that's just why I'm funny, because that he embraced that in the end, and he
Mhm.
didn't like look down on West Side or anything, but Tom was the first one to identify. He's like, it's like, Glenn, you're basically doing conjugate for weightlifting. It's like,
Mm.
no, I'm fucking not. Like he and like I had the same exact conversation with him once. It's like, I think you're completely wrong. Sean, you got no idea what you're talking about. But I feel that way about it in what he's doing for sure. I think that's what's going on, and it's an apt label, I guess, so to speak. But absolutely. So go ahead.
No, it's so interesting you say that, because like in those later episodes, if you go to the weightlifting, for people listening, I'm not talking to you, Sean, but if you go to the early episodes of the Weightlifting House podcast, one, he has episodes talking about Louis and how he kind of, admired the way he approached powerlifting, in that his ultimate pursuit was to get people stronger. He kind of lived and died by that. And that resonated with Glenn.
Yes.
And also they would talk about like the influence there. So I never thought there would be not necessarily like friction or static, but a difference of opinion with respect to what they were doing, because to me it looks very West Side.
He definitely didn't, I don't want to say there was friction. He didn't like dislike Louis. Like he always had exactly what you said, that like, living the samurai
Like
way.
admiration or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
He genuinely believes that, like, in what we're doing is like living by the iron kind of thing, that he's doing
Mhm.
the same thing as Louis, and that admiration is there, and like for what Louis was doing there for sure. But
Mm.
when we brought it up to him, he was like, no, no. So it's, I think it's just a Glennism. Maybe he was just in a mood.
Yeah.
It was just funny that Tom and I had the same like exact conversation basically.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but I am so fortunate to have exposure to all those guys, because I definitely kind of I take and mix and match or
Mhm.
whatever lessons from all of them for sure. Glenn kind of gave me the foundations for. He did a
Mhm.
fantastic job, and he really, like I said, stress management, environment. Those are still
Mhm.
the most important thing. Programming is like fifth, and it's I think that's the bedrock. If we're talking about making elite weightlifters, like those are the things you need to worry about first, more than other things. Because if you're just not an idiot, you can get a program together and you can
Mhm.
be competent enough. You don't need to be Don McCauley to teach someone to snatch, right? You can get somebody good enough. I think
Mhm.
Glenn even said that to me. He's like, yeah, just get your technique like good enough, 80%, and then just get stronger.
Yeah.
And he's technically not wrong, but
Right.
I was like, man, I'm still really bad at weightlifting, so I want to get to like 90% technique. How about that?
Mhm.
And whereas Don, Don is the one who, with this novice elite idea, really basically exposed me to like classical periodization, or like
Mm.
what Soviets were doing, And so
Mhm.
looking at, yeah, it turns out that just jumping into a sport at a high level probably isn't the best all the time. Like you wouldn't expect a guy to play in the NFL without having played Pop Warner in high school and
Mhm.
college, having
Mhm.
12 plus years of football under their belt, right? So I mean that makes sense for weightlifting, just because it's, not a team sport or whatever. So Don, you know, opened my eyes to longer term development of an athlete and what
Mhm.
that picture should look like. Um, Travis is probably the most inventive coach that I've
Mm.
had. Like Travis is great at just having a unique perspective with problems, and like I think he loves problem solving as much as I do. He
Mhm.
really wants to tinker. Like he'll find a way. He doesn't care if he has to go to Louis Simmons or to go to
Mhm.
someone like Cal Dietz or whoever it is. He's like,
Mm.
well, let's try it. You know what I mean? He's
Mhm.
willing to try anything, probably more than any weightlifting coach out there. And I think that's his greatest strength. He's also probably the best motivator that I've ever had in my life.
Mm.
I remember when Travis was coaching us, I did some of my best performances because he's so good at
Mhm.
convincing you to believe in yourself. So
Mm.
that was super helpful. And then yeah, there's stuff from Chris that I Kane is one of my coaches here at the gym. So I
Oh
still,
wow, I didn't know that.
yeah. So Kane is one of the coaches here, and he still lives pretty close to us. So I don't see Coach Chris as often as I'd like, but I see Kane, probably 3 times a week, and
Mhm.
that's still definitely part of my life. I know John North is fond of the expand your melting pot kind of phrase. But really, I'm serious. It is what it is.
Yeah,
Like it's the
yeah,
reason that you seek out education in a lot of
right.
different methods. Like why you and I were in that course with Spencer, right? Because we're
Hmm.
trying to expand knowledge and get everything we can and kind of meld it together. And I don't know, some super coach formula or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think a couple things I just wanted to touch on. I think the big thing with coaching in general is once you start to understand like the general principles, you can start to open up like your mind to more methods. And I was talking to my girlfriend about this a few times, but um, I wish I could rebrand my podcast. Louis has his book called A Book of Methods. I wish I could call, my podcast the whatever podcast, a podcast of methods, because that's really what it is it's getting on a lot of different coaches with a lot of different ideas, all follow the same general principles somewhat. I mean, you're going to weightlift, that's specific. You're going to add weight over time or add reps or add volume, that's overload. You're going to vary it to avoid monotony. Like, you have to adhere somewhat, and the way these are prioritized may be varied, but like you could see with Glenn and then with Don, right? Glenn would prioritize specificity and overload, and Don might say, okay, we need to use some sort of variation, and we're going to prioritize less specific training at this point because it makes more sense. So they're both following the principles. It's just like which they choose to adhere to more closely, and that's where you get into the nuance, and this is a conversation I think more people should have. Once you develop an understanding of the principles and ways to use them, you can coach to your coaching personality. You can coach to your preferences. So Travis Cooper mentioned that they would go heavy because that's what people wanted to see when they recorded it. Glenn admittedly loved to see people go heavy. He loved hard training. Um, and that's like coaching to his preference. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Once you figure out what you like and what you think works, you can kind of develop a plan. But it always comes back to the foundational information. And then you can expose yourself to more ideas, more concepts, and integrate it. But if you start with the methods, you just start to lose sight of everything, because suddenly conjugate is the thing, like is the training thing. It's really just a way to use the principles and ideas of like, how long it takes someone to adapt to training and what's more important, muscle size or neurological, like the scientific nerd stuff, with respect to training. But how do you
That's a
how
great
do
way.
you
That's a
take
great way of putting it, Josh. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Well, the principles are set, like the book that Israel and Chad put out,
Yeah, yeah.
scientific principles of strength training, I believe it's called.
Hmm.
It's a short read. It's like maybe 100 pages,
Hmm.
mostly ebook form, but it outlines them right there, and it's meant for powerlifting.
Hmm.
You know, to have specificity towards that, but the principles are right there. The overload, and they have their own opinion on what order in hierarchy there is,
Right,
but like those are the same principles. Like we cannot escape them. And you're
right,
right. Yeah,
right.
coaching style is probably about how you manipulate and emphasize them.
Yeah, I think a lot of their approach is the whole idea of reductio ad absurdum. It's like if I talk about specificity and then I say, well, you can overload, vary your training, you can fatigue manage, you can like adhere to the SRA curve, but if you're running marathons for powerlifting, like it doesn't make sense. So it has to be specific. So a lot of their information is like going to push it to the extreme so you understand the concept. I think it, whatever, maybe the programming looks a little different from what they would give, but the ideas hold. Your experience, how do you use all of that information and then apply it to um, a big weightlifting club where you coach in person? And so you talk about formulating an environment. Like, how do you use that information to now formulate what you think is the most efficacious environment to help people succeed in weightlifting, knowing that it's different from muscle driver?
Sure. um, you know I think individual differences
Hmm.
are relevant and important. And if you have an athlete, like if you have my wife, somebody who's trying to make
Mm-hmm.
international
Mm-hmm.
teams or podium nationally, whatever, someone who's gonna commit fully to it, you can get into the minutia of it. But when you're
Mm-hmm.
coaching a big club of just normal people, they just want an enjoyable training experience. Obviously, they want to progress. Like everybody
Right.
wants to get better. Like that's kind of what draws us to lifting. Like it's so objective, right? You either did lift more weight or you did not.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of times that's the only measure that we feel of
Right.
progress, even though that's not necessarily true. But you know, understanding, taking a macro look on what's the population I'm dealing with, and it may not always apply to everybody. So that gives me like normal volume parameters, right?
Mm.
And then understanding, okay, most of them are relatively new to weightlifting. Okay, so that gives me like exercise and specificity
Mm.
parameters, right? So I can be like, okay, we need specificity for sure because they
Mm-hmm.
literally need to learn how to do weightlifting and like get better at it from being unpracticed. But they also just need general exercises because training is
Mm.
still like a newer thing, right? Um, and then I think the enjoyment factor comes in, and I
Mm.
guess this is where I learned from our system. They need to be doing something that's challenging and something that they're all have a shared experience with. So in our sense, that was the shared experience of like going heavy on our respective exercises, maybe at
Mm.
muscle driver or just snatch and clean, and they need that too. They need to know that um, their friend is undergoing the same torture, so to speak, and seeing how they dealt with it, and being on the same program is not as bad as it's made out to be, like a
Mm-hmm.
cookie cutter program, because
Yeah.
the competition yielded from it tends to also yield better results.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I went want to be super impractical to individualize for I guess in person that would be like 60 plus lifters here.
Mm.
Um, I don't know who's going to have the time to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
um, look like I said, looking at the big picture, which kind of eliminate some of those little individual differences, but
Mm-hmm.
those little individual differences are probably at the bottom of the hierarchy, right? I think they
Mm-hmm.
even say that in the book that we mentioned. Like that's like the last thing you consider. Like
Mm-hmm.
um, if one person is 5'5" and the other one's 6'5", yeah, the 6'5" is kind of getting screwed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
like literally every repetition is more work. But
Mm-hmm.
we're also their athlete classification isn't super high, so like it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
okay that they do like slightly more work all the time. So that's as with all things, looking at the athletes that you're trying to program for, what
Mm-hmm.
their needs are, what their qualification is, and in this case, just taking a more general look on who we're dealing with, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to worrying about all the minutia of it.
Yeah. And then, coming from being an athlete full time to, well, training full time to opening your own facility, or, I think you mentioned over the call we had earlier that you merged with an existing facility and running a business and taking on the life of a full time coach, essentially. What has that been like? And a lot of people listening to this podcast are either, and you can always easily classify them as already established, establishing, or new coaches and athletes. So what were some mistakes that you made, or things you did really well, starting out, that you would kind of pass on to the people who either are building a club, want to build a club, or have one established and they're looking just to always improve, which is kind of the name of the game here.
Sure. Like I was a coach before an athlete, so coaching's kind of
Mm-hmm.
always been a joy. Uh, Doing it for weightlifting, was just sort of like, oh well, I'm a weightlifting athlete. I've got to make money somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But since
Mm-hmm.
the fall of Muscle Driver, it became I kind of fell into an accident. I got approached by a CrossFit gym in town to like essentially run like an in-person barbell club, and
Mm.
I was like, okay, well, I guess that sounds interesting. I'll give it a shot. I was actually gonna go back to grad school. My degree is in literature, and I was going to begin a PhD in literature. And that's something
Wow.
that's something I still intend to undertake once I can get this, on autopilot, so to speak. But it's very difficult. It is um, rewarding personally, but not
Mm-hmm.
monetarily. I would never advise a person to like have coaching or a barbell club be their primary source of income right
Mm,
away, because you will make sacrifices. You will be required to make sacrifices that mo- most people can't bear.
mm,
I somehow made it out, but
mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have had to do what I did. We started. So that was the in-person barbell club. I've been coaching people all over town and remotely since I guess 2013. But
Mm-hmm.
in-person barbell club started on January 1st of 2017. In Charlotte here. So through what is it now, December 1st of 2020, this has been a journey from then of attrition, just a war of attrition.
Mm,
Being in a CrossFit gym, is a necessary evil. I find that
mm-hmm.
relationship tends to run out, you know, at some point. So cl- having clear communications and the nature of your business relationship with, like, if you're going to go that route, which is really common for a barbell club to start in a CrossFit gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure things are on paper and that you both know like what you're trying to accomplish. In my situation with the CrossFit gym, I thought I was trying to grow my barbell club. Apparently, what I was doing was competing with my
Mm.
with my my rent my
Your
land
employer,
my
basically.
employer. Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially. And which is funny because the nature of that relationship was like a revenue share. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
I wasn't paying rent. Like, he was making money the more I made money, but
Mm-hmm.
he saw it as every weightlifter that I brought into the gym was a person who should be doing CrossFit. And it's like, okay,
Right.
well, I don't know what you want me to do about that. So just having clear expectations and a business agreement with a person before you
Mm.
go into business with them is very smart to do. And that's the same thing that my now business partner, that we merged with, ran into when he was doing this in a CrossFit gym.
Mm.
Um, Running a gym or a barbell club is not coaching. So
Mm.
understand that right away. Like, I have to know, it's taken me a while and I'm probably still not the best at it, but I have to know like accounting as good as I need to know programming. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, I need to know what my ARM is, my average revenue per member. I need to know my length of engagement, how long a member's in here. I need to know my obviously my gross revenue, and then what my expenses are, all this stuff. These are things that a coach, I don't think anybody listening to this podcast who wants to take up coaching is like, oh fuck yeah, I'm looking forward to that, like, part-time job doing accounting and running sales metrics, right? Like, but
Yeah.
that's what it is. That's what it is. So you need to decide. I would advise people early on, like, okay, why are you doing this? Why are you coaching?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you enjoy coaching weightlifting? Great. So do I. It's my favorite thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just fucking do that. Like, find a
Mm.
way to just do that, because I guarantee you're not going to like the rest of this.
Mm.
You're not going to like, standing on a 20-foot ladder replacing light bulbs in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
day and like putting off your training because, like, it's got to get done, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just what it is. And I'm not bitching here. It's just I started doing this because I wanted to coach weightlifters because that's what I enjoy doing. So don't I would advise people, one, yeah, get the relationship sorted out. If you're going to rent from somebody or be in a CrossFit gym, whatever, have clearly outlined expectations of how that's going to work. And two, don't open your own gym until you can pay yourself a salary that will double all of your essential bills,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you're just going to be miserable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that was pretty apt kind of depiction of where you're at and what the reality of it is. Um, is there anything that you felt you did particularly well starting out that, you're kind of lucky that you were able to either accomplish or pick up? That's, I mean, because you are, self-sufficient now and you are running a business and you are coaching like a good number of, like you've been pretty successful if we want to use those as the metrics.
Sure.
Is there anything that you feel you can attribute either to your character or just the situation, or what you've picked up over time that's helped with that?
Yeah, sorry. I feel like that was really negative way because like I get asked a lot, the question like, hey,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
how do I start a gym? So a lot of my answers
Hmm.
are like pre-programmed from like fucking don't do
Right.
it. But coaching is a joy, and I'd say the success that we have, yeah, this came down to um if there's one thing, it is, and not to like pat myself on the back, if there's one
Hmm.
thing, it's my undying love for this thing, and
Hmm.
wanting to share that with other people, and being enthusiastic about their growth in this, to not
Hmm.
care that I have lived in poverty for, well, basically since muscle driver, since 2013,
Hmm.
until I said, coronavirus is actually going great for me.
Hmm.
Because this is the year that we were able to get a new space and do a merger, and
Hmm.
I'm paid a salary now. All my coaches are paid and they're
Oh, wow.
happy, and like I'm not saying it's a ton of money, but it's
It's something.
well, I don't worry about my bills now. Before it's
Right.
like, if I lost a member of my club or my gym or whatever, like well,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills because that bill needs to get
Hmm.
paid, kind of a thing. And
Hmm.
and it's finally a place where I'm not there anymore. I'm
Hmm.
self-sufficient and comfortable as a full-time coach, and I guess this sort of manager of this thing. Um, but yeah, I think have a connect, be authentic and genuine with people, and have
Hmm.
empathy, which these are good things to do as a person, not
Hmm.
not just as a coach. And I think that is why, like, my, if you want to use a fancy business term, my length of engagement, or my
Hmm.
churn rate is very low, and that's because I just put a lot into them,
Hmm.
and they stick around. They see that I put a lot into them, and I'm going to keep doing that. I'm never going to not do that, because it's the only way I understand how to coach. Don McCauley used to get up early before training and drive 45 minutes both ways in his shitty Kia, whatever the fuck it was that eventually broke
Hmm.
down, to pick up Rachel Davis for training. You
Hmm.
know, because he did it. Don McCauley
Hmm.
declined being the head Team USA coach for the 2014 World Championships in Kazakhstan, which would have been fucking sick to go to because of Ilya,
Hmm.
obviously, uh,
Hmm.
because he said there are too many people here that need me. You
Yeah.
know, Glenn Penley let me, crash on his floor. Glenn Penley was blind and walked to Home Depot to get a piece of wood for me to make a wrist roller out of, because
Hmm.
my grip strength sucks because I have tiny bitch hands. So like, these are the people that taught me that, like, this is what coaching is. It is
Hmm.
this selfless endeavor that you must engage on, or don't fucking do it. So I think that's the reason I've had success, if we want to call it that, is because I was taught how to do it that way.
It's just like there's no other way. It's kind of, I guess it boils back to boils down to kind of that idea. Maybe we don't romanticize it quite as much, but the idea of the life of a samurai. You kind of dedicate yourself to this one thing, and your decisions revolve around doing it as well as you can and making it a priority. Um,
Yeah,
it's not all it's cracked up to be. Admittedly, it's Glenn talks about the failed relationships and the hardships and the struggles, and um, that's kind of inherent within it as well. I mean, you mentioned not being able to really pay yourself much, if at all, and the enjoyment was the kind of the income to some extent.
yeah, yeah. Just knowing that you're kind of screwed month to month really sucks. But if
Yeah,
you can do it, uh, if you really want to, I guess you will, or you won't. So yeah,
yeah,
just really love it, like all things, really love it. I'm here, I'm at my office right now because I love doing this thing. It's a lot of work. I work literally every day. I think I took Thanksgiving off. I didn't answer like any emails. I turned my phone off, and like, I'm fortunate to be in a place where I can like take a day off now. It's really cool.
hmm,
But that was after like years of not, you know.
right,
If you're gonna, a lot of people can't function without a weekend, off to
right,
themselves. They're like, oh, I'm so burnt out. It's like, don't talk to me because
Right.
I'm here doing it every day. And this isn't like
Mhm.
I'm the Rock. It's 4 a.m. I'm in the Iron Paradise grinding. Where you at? Get on your Adderall and your drugs and fucking, no, I'm not saying I'm that guy or anything. I still get 8 hours of sleep a night and shit. But yeah, if you're going to work this hard for something to make this little,
Mm,
you better fucking love it.
mm. Now, I mean, I think we've kind of at least had somewhat of a comprehensive look at your time from the rugby days up until Muscle Driver, through Muscle Driver up until now. What are your plans? What are Sean Rigsby's plans as an athlete, as a coach? Is it to continue building the club, the team, the business? And are you still looking to, hit some all-time PRs?
Always, always. So I've been working with Max Ada for the past couple of months.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I have the good fortune of working with another incredibly influential and talented coach, who I learn from all the time also. Um, and coronavirus and like the opening of this place has definitely thrown a wrench in my training. It's not
Mm-hmm.
gone as well as I'd like. So right now I'm kind of just doing some GPP type stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Power Athlete at all or what
Yeah, I've
they.
heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're like CrossFit football. That's like
Mm-hmm.
the kind of programming I started doing.
Oh, okay.
So it's a real fun thing because if you feel like an athlete and you're moving around and you're still getting strong and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just doing that to the end of the year, and then I'm going to start trying
Mm-hmm.
to weightlift again next week, I think, or next year, and get back to it. And yeah, I
Yeah.
want to hit a clean and jerk PR. I think I can
Mm-hmm.
absolutely do that. So
No snatch PR?
I don't know, man. It just hurts all the time to snatch, so
Yeah.
it's tough. I'm thinking of training like a thrower, where I'm like gonna invest like a lot of time into like cleaning heavy, but then like
Mm-hmm.
only do like hang power snatches with straps or some shit, and like maybe if I hang power snatch 150, like it'll be all right,
Right.
that won't be too
Right.
bad. So that's my training. A lot of it. I was in shape earlier in the year, and I was supposed to go to Russia for the European
Mm-hmm.
Championships, but that obviously didn't happen, like many people.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm going to get to do it next year just because travel restrictions, going to Russia
Mm-hmm.
and all that stuff. Like, you got to get there in quarantine and then you got to come back in
Mm-hmm.
quarantine. Like, I can't exactly afford to take a month off of work. I don't know
Right.
if anybody else can, but I can't. So, I'd really like to go to Worlds next year. Actually, they're in Peru.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be weird to go to Worlds after the Olympics, I guess, but that's the world.
Yeah.
So that's my athletic goals. I'm not done. I'm gonna keep going. Uh, I think I'm gonna do this until I can't anymore. So even even if I'm just like that guy who's like 45 or whatever and just barely hanging on, like I'm gonna keep pushing it because I enjoy it a lot. With our gym, like our gym's doing great. I just want to focus on the lifters that we have and develop
Mm-hmm.
them. That's very bad for business. I should be trying to get as many people in here as possible. We do
Yeah.
a program like a beginner's class called Barbell Basics, actually, where beginners can come in and get
Mm-hmm.
get exposure. And then we just launched like a fitness program, and I'm helping our fitness director grow that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of the business goals. I just coaching is a long term endeavor, so I just want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure the people that we have are getting where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, for people, and I guess before we wrap up, I did want to actually ask about just quickly. I mean, I know we've been going on and on, but how were your experiences at Worlds, at European Champs? Like, how were those international big events that people only dream about attending?
Oh, they're super cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's a little different being myself. So, if you're on Team USA now, you're getting funded, you're going out
Mm-hmm.
there in advance. Maybe you get to do like a special advance trip to Tokyo training camp. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
pay for anything. When you're on Team Ireland, uh, things are a little bit different. You're
You get a pint of Guinness and
not even
Sia.
that would have been nice. That would have been nice. No. Yourself, and I'm not bitching because I did this, but it's a
Yeah.
little less glamorous, So you're self funded. You're booking your own flight. You're booking, you're telling them in advance because you have to go through the IWF for your hotels. So you're telling them
Mm-hmm.
like when you're going to get in and when you're going to get out. You've got to pay more for the hotels than they like,
Mm.
at least twice as much than they're actually worth because the IWF executives need to be subsidized for their time because they pay nothing the entire time, whereas so the cost is passed on to the athlete, which doesn't really matter when like China is paying, the government for that cost, but it does matter when you're self-funding. But it is what it is. But once you're there, it's absolutely fantastic. I was in Romania in 2018. I'm in the training hall. I think it's my first morning, and I'm barely hanging on training wise. And there's Lasha on the platform next to me. Just fucking crushing some 200 kilo snatches. Just multiple times, just over and over again. And seeing it was like that moment I first watched weightlifting again when you get on the international and like everybody's good. Everybody's very good. Watching and observing the slight differences in how everybody, because this is peaking time, right? It's not training time. The slight differences in how everybody does things is fascinating to me. But again, most of us are doing the same fucking thing. The people might want to throw in some back extensions, I guess, but that's about the only difference, that's going on. And getting to lift on those stages is like getting to lift on the world stage last year. That was the most exhilarating 6 lifts I ever had. It's just a lot of fun. It's the joy of weightlifting, but like it's like you're on drugs, I guess. Not that I would know, but it's probably how it feels,
Right. Do you define that kind of as so far like the one of the greatest moments or the greatest moment of your like weightlifting career is getting to compete on that level, or is there anything else that kind of sticks out that supersedes that?
No, that's definitely the pinnacle. And it's probably just because you fixate on it for so long. Because like at Worlds last year, I didn't lift my best lifts. I did fine, but I didn't do my absolute best. But being out there and getting to compete among the best in the world is great. Like I don't, I was a 109 last year, so I wasn't competing with Simone Matrosian. Let's not mistake that. We just happen to be in the same weight category, but it's cool, getting to compete with people from like Canada and the UK and a couple other countries. Like we're doing about the same weights, and they're also great guys. The more I travel the world, the more I find that weightlifters are mostly the same. We kind of have the same, general personalities and dispositions towards things, and everybody's just great. I don't know if it's this shared sense of, obsession that we have, with this thing, but getting to go out there and compete amongst those guys is, definitely the highlight for sure.
Yeah, and you're saying you're not competing against Martirosian, but I don't think many people were even competing against him. I mean, if you weren't like top 3, you just didn't even have a chance to sniff at him. Which is he's a phenomenal weightlifter, so well deserved. But Sean, as we wrap up here, where can people, if people want to know more about anything that we've discussed, or programming, training, literature? I mean, you seem to be, well versed in that if you have a degree. So where can they kind of contact you or reach out to you if they want to chat about any of these things?
Sure. Well, they can look us up at cltstrength.com. That's the gym website, and there's like a contact form on there, so people can always reach out and ask any questions. We've got some. That website's kind of new, but we're building it out with a lot of the old articles, like the one you were asking me about, how to build a platform and stuff like that. So we'll be developing that one out. They can also go to heavymetalbarbellclub.com. That's my personal. That's like my remote online services and stuff. Or just follow me on Instagram at Sean M Rigsby. I'm real easy to find. I'll sometimes I'm slow. I'm trying. I've made like a thing. I'm minimizing my social media time so I can maximize my education time. But sometimes I will always respond eventually if anybody wants to DM me. So those are the best ways.
And the very last question: top 3 books of all time, not nothing specific to training or programming, but if you have a degree in literature, I'm assuming you have a very deep taste in books.
I do. And we should have done that at the beginning of the podcast because it's going to take a while. Life-changing book, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut.
Mm.
Classic book, I guess. You see, this question's too hard. It's too hard to answer. Let's see. Let's go ahead and just throw that in there, like Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Also fantastic. And then most of my stuff was actually spent studying Shakespeare and Chaucer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't. I went to Oxford for a program to study medieval and Renaissance literature, and so that's what most of my time was spent studying. But the rest of it was on the American novel in the 20th century. So if I don't at least mention, let's see, let's go with Hamlet. That's fine. Yeah, that'll be fine.
That's fine.
Yeah. That's the short list.
Phone a friend. I guess we'll pull this one in.
If you haven't read Slaughterhouse-Five, read it. It won't take long, and you either get it or you don't. But if you do get it, your life will be better. So
yeah, I feel like I can't, because of your you understand the those things so well. I can't even formulate questions that will make sense. I'll sound like a moron. So I'll just stop it there. And
I'm happy anytime to talk about it if you want.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, we can chat Chaucer, and maybe even start a podcast specifically talking about that thing. But
Chaucer House, got it.
Chaucer House 5, yeah, there you go. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, Sean, for joining me. It was a blast. I hope people enjoy this episode of the podcast. Anytime you want to come back on and have a chat, more than welcome. So I just want to say thanks for sharing everything that you've spent your life, the last decade dedicating to the sport. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was kind of nice thinking about all these things, and always wonderful talking to somebody who is also spending quite a significant portion of their life doing this thing. So thanks for having me.
Yep. And for anyone who wants to support the podcast, share it with your friends, give us a rating. I don't care if you give us 1 star, at least tell me why you did it. And thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. Catch you next time.